I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Price Your Products and Services Right. This webinar is brought to you by Renewed, the open network for specialized subscription, membership, and event professionals. My name is Greg Crable, and I'll be your host for today's event. During today's presentation, everyone please remain on mute unless I call upon you. If you're having some trouble, then connect with me in the chat through Zoom. The chat on mine is, if I bring my cursor down to the bottom, it's like the fourth icon from the left on the bottom of the screen. After the presentation, you'll get an email about the recording. You can also get the recordings in an address which I'll put in the chat in a minute. We also encourage you to share takeaways from this event on social media. You can use hashtag Renewed. Renewed is tricky. There's only 2 E's instead of 3. It's RENEWD. Or you can post something on LinkedIn and tag Mark. Mark is in LinkedIn frequently. So on today's session, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mark Stiving. Mark has coached hundreds of companies, large and small, on pricing. Mark has driven company-wide pricing initiatives worth hundreds of millions of dollars in incremental profit. He started and sold 3 companies and has written 3 books on pricing and value. I read one of them, it was very good. Mark evangelizes pricing at major conferences and has conducted more than 400 days of corporate training for companies like Bloomberg, Ernst & Young, and Tyco Electronics. Mark's doctorate is in marketing from UC Berkeley, and he lives in Reno. Mark is also the chief pricing educator at Impact Pricing LLC. So first of all, welcome, Mark. And second, how does one become a pricing expert?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but first tell me which book you read. I have to know.
Oh gosh, it was the one you gave me at the conference last year.
Oh, like I remember, probably Win, Keep, Grow.
Yes, Win, Keep, Grow. I'm bad at remembering titles, but it was Win, Keep, Grow. It was very good.
Okay, got it. Okay, so what a fabulous question, because this is advice I give a lot of people, and that is, here's how you become an expert. You say the words, I'm an expert, and you're now an expert. Now, you got to back it up, right? So my life, I had a Ph.D. in pricing, and one of the companies that I ended up selling, I was working as a president of the company I sold to. We were selling to the new production home marketplace, and in 2008, that marketplace just shut down, right? Everything went kaput. And I'm in a deep depression trying to figure out who's going to hire a failed CEO. And I decided, hey, I know pricing, or at least I could pretend to know pricing. And I claimed to be an expert. And at that point in time, I started blogging, I started writing, I put out tons of content. I have blogged weekly since 2010. I study, I read, I help other pricing experts. So anybody can be an expert. It just takes 10 years. And you have to say, I'm going to be an expert at this, whatever it happens to be. So how's that?
That's pretty good. It reminds me of, what's that? Some book says you have to do 10,000 hours of something to become an expert. So what would you say for this marketplace? What's the biggest mistake you see publishers make when pricing their products?
Yeah, this is actually the hardest question of all the ones you sent me ahead of time. This is the hardest question for me to answer. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of companies make is their product portfolio, not their pricing. So if you have, let's pretend that we're talking about a magazine or a newspaper, and all we've got is a magazine or a newspaper, then all we can do is put a price on it. And we lose a ton of our pricing ability and our pricing power when that's what happens. Where in truth, we should be thinking about who are the different market segments that we serve, how much is each segment willing to pay, and could I tweak my product for each of those segments? Could I create good, better, best offerings inside a given market segment so that I can get people who are willing to pay me more to actually pay me more? Could I create options for people who love me and love what I'm doing and be able to sell them add-ons to what it is that we're doing? Pricing, although pricing is always about how do we put a price on something or how do we put a number on something, Most of the time, it's about understanding how our customers value our products. And once we understand that, then there's all sorts of decisions we can make. But probably the most powerful one is how are we going to package our products?
Mhm. Can you think of a good example where someone had some relatively simple product, like a magazine, it doesn't have to be a magazine, and then they followed that sort of advice and came up with different tiers or different levels or something. They transformed the product to address the kind of method you're talking about.
Let me give you my favorite company that does pricing. It's not in publishing world, but it is just the most amazing pricing company out there, and that is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And the reason I love LinkedIn so much is because they started out by saying, hey, we serve these different market segments. Different market segments have a different willingness to pay. So I'm going to create or tweak my product for those market segments. Now, in case you're not familiar, their 4 market segments that they've identified are recruiters, salespeople, job seekers, and then professionals. Everybody else gets lumped into professionals. Recruiters make so much money off of having access to LinkedIn information that they end up charging recruiters a whole lot more. The only way they can do that, though, is by tweaking the product and giving them features and access and capabilities that they don't give to anybody else, but are very valuable to recruiters.
Mhm.
So this is just, that's the market segment piece, and it is so powerful.
Hmm.
Then if you take a look inside any one of those market segments, they're offering good, better, best, or tiers of pricing. So you could be a recruiter, a sole proprietor recruiter, and buy their good package. You could be a recruiter at a high-end company, buy their best package, and they're charging very different amounts of money, giving different features and capabilities. So I think it is so powerful. And yet, from the customer's perspective, it's very simple, right? A customer doesn't have to look through 100 different options and say, these are the things I want. They say, oh, I'm a recruiter. Do I want the good, the better, or the best?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's really simple from that perspective.
Now, I've heard people say that one of the benefits of good, better, best is that you drive people towards better. People tend to go into the middle. Is that true?
Yeah, let's talk about 2 different types of products for a second. In the world of transactions, not subscriptions, so we'll think of this as a traditional business, then absolutely good, better, best, most people buy the one in the middle.
Mhm.
And the reason we buy the one in the middle is we don't want to make a mistake. If we buy the cheap one, it might not be good enough. If we buy the expensive one, we might be wasting our money. So we buy the one in the middle, and that's easy.
Mhm.
And that happens because we're not experts in the product. We don't know exactly what we need. We're rarely experts in the decisions that we make.
Mhm.
On the other hand, in the world of subscriptions, people might choose some level of your product and they quickly become an expert at that level because now they're experiencing it. They know what it is that it does for them. And so it's pretty common in subscriptions to do good, better, best pricing. And our goal here is to get people in at our good product and then upsell them or cross-sell them into our better or our best packages.
Mhm.
In the world of, here's a huge hint for everybody who's in a subscription type business. I guarantee you that you say the words inside your company, we run a land and expand strategy. And I also guarantee you that you do a ton of work on landing new customers and you do very little work on expanding the revenue you get from current customers.
Hmm.
There's so much more money in the expand piece than there is in the land piece. I would shift the focus of my company to expand, which, by the way, the book that I gave you last year, Greg, is Win, Keep, Grow, which means for subscriptions, we need to win customers, keep customers, grow customers. And those are 3 different revenue streams that we have to think about when we're running a subscription business.
Mhm. Now, everybody, I have a long list of questions and I can easily spend the whole time asking questions, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. You mentioned experts, and I remember reading something by you recently, Mark, about the different approach that experts have to a pricing decision than non-experts. It had to do with features and benefits. Do you?
Oh, got it. Now I remember what you're, it's like, I write a ton. So it turns out that you've probably heard people talk about, do you sell features? Do you sell benefits? What are you trying to sell? And it turns out that the way you should think about this is that experts buy features, non-experts buy benefits. Imagine for a second that I'm guessing that you've probably owned 5 to 10 different computers in your life at this point in time. So you're probably pretty close to what we would call an expert. You walk into Best Buy and you say, hey, I'm looking for a new computer. And the person at Best Buy says to you, what would you like to do? This one does email really well and you can talk to your family. And you're thinking, just shut up. How many gigabytes does it have? And how big's the hard drive? Right? Because you're buying features at this point.
Mhm.
On the other hand, imagine you've never bought a computer before and you walk into Best Buy and the guy behind the counter says, this one's got 3 terabytes of memory and a huge hard disk and a huge monitor. You're like, well, what do I need? What can I do with that? And so in truth, when we're marketing or talking to our customers, we want to be talking to experts with our features, non-experts with our benefits. Most people are not experts in our products until they've bought and started using them, and then they become experts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. To what extent, right now there's all kinds of concerns about the economy. Are we going into recession and all that sort of stuff? To what extent should companies tie prices to overall market situations like a recession or inflation or something like that?
Yeah. So my opinion is they shouldn't, right? You should not be tying your price to inflation. Now, let's just talk about inflation now, because that's where we are today, right? Inflation. You should not be tying your price to inflation. However, you should use the current economic situation as an opportunity to revisit your pricing. So is it the right time to raise prices? And the way you want to think about that, it's a relatively complex conversation to have. If you are selling, let's break it up into necessities or luxuries, right? Or necessities and non-necessities. If you are selling necessities, then odds are good people are going to continue buying your product, even if you raise the price. Now, there's 2 types of people. Let's call them struggling and comfortable, right? For the sake of argument, people who are struggling, they might find ways to do less, right? So you want to use less electricity because the electric bill's high. So you try to find ways to use a little bit less. People who are comfortable, probably not. They're going to buy the same. And if you ended up raising prices, it wouldn't really affect them. When we get to luxuries, on the other hand, if you're selling luxury goods to people who are struggling, may I suggest you find a new business right now, right? Because these people are not going to Starbucks to buy coffee. They're spending all their money on their necessities.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not raising prices, you're finding a new market segment, finding a new market. If you're selling luxuries to the people who are comfortable, then what's happening right now is those people, they feel a little guilty, right? So they're thinking to themselves, I shouldn't be spending all this money, but I probably still will. Maybe I'll cut back a little bit on these things. But if you raise prices, it doesn't really impact whether or not they're going to buy. The thing that's impacting whether or not they're going to buy right now is just their guilt for the fact that they have money and so many other people are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
So use inflation as an indicator or hint that says to you, I need to go revisit my pricing. I need to take a look at it again.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were going to give you any advice on taking a look at it again, it would be watch your competitors. Let's assume that your customers are making a decision. Am I going to buy from you or am I going to buy from a competitor? So watch your competitors. What are they doing with their price? If they raise their price, you should raise your price immediately. If they're not raising their prices, you can try leading a price increase and seeing if they follow. Because they're probably in the same boat you are, and that is saying, look, my costs are going up. I'm watching the few people who have their cameras on, they're just scribbling notes frantically. I love watching this.
Yeah, so let's take the same basic question and apply it to something really specific. Like, let's say you have a print magazine and paper costs have shot through the roof and maybe postage costs have gone up. So you have a in your specific product, the cost of goods has gone up dramatically. Now, should you use that as an explanation for a price increase to your market?
Yes, but let me give you a lot more detail than just the yes, if that's okay. I wouldn't go out and start outlining paper costs went up, ink costs went up, gas costs went up, or delivery price went up. I wouldn't do that. I would simply say costs have gone up. By the way, even if you've got an all digital product, you can say the words costs have gone up. Your labor costs might have gone up. I guarantee you some costs have gone up. The only reason, if you're going to raise prices, and this is not justifying a price increase, I'm sorry, this is not telling you to raise prices.
Mhm.
This is assuming that you've already decided you're going to raise prices. Now, what are you going to do and how are you going to communicate to your marketplace? And I always recommend 4 steps or 4 things that you want to do for your communication. The first one is blame costs, right? My costs went up. Right now, during inflation, that's a really easy thing for people to believe. Number 2 is we haven't raised prices in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the number is. Number 3, we've delivered a ton more value than when you first signed up.
Mhm.
Our product's so much better. And number 4, do something nice for your subscribers.
Hmm.
And by that, what I mean, so let's use a quick Netflix example. Netflix, when they did their first price increase, I think it was 2011, they blew it as big as any company could ever blow it, right? And they lost 800,000 subscribers and 75% of their stock price, and it was just a huge fiasco. The next time they did a price increase, which is about 2 years later, they did an amazingly good job.
Hmm.
And one of the things they did was they said to all the subscribers, we're raising prices, but because you're such a loyal customer, we're going to hold your price constant for 6 months. And then 5 months later, they sent out another email. Hey, remember we raised prices back then and we held your price constant. Now it's time.
Mhm.
So essentially, you're doing something nice for your subscribers to say, hey, you're important, you're valuable to me. But in the end, I have to raise prices.
Mhm. So I remember one thing that you mentioned at the subscription show last year that I thought was very, very interesting. We all know that you can't go to your market and say, would you pay $50 for this thing? Because it doesn't mean anything until they actually put their credit card on, but you had another question that you could ask to kind of get an indication of, what is a reasonable price in a certain market that doesn't fall into that trap. Do you remember what that
Oh,
was?
I remember very well. I use this question a lot.
Okay.
And so what Greg's really saying is you can't go to a customer and say, how much would you pay for this? Because they're going to game the answer to that. They're thinking, well, if I give you a small number or if I give you a big number, you're going to charge that to me. So I'll give you a small number. And in truth, the question that works so much better is ask, how much do you think other people would pay for this? And now the person you're talking to is putting themselves in other people's shoes. In truth, the only thing they can do is think about the decision they would make. And so whatever answer they give you is really the answer they were thinking for themselves. Now, this isn't scientific, but it is a great, simple, fast question to ask when you're out in the marketplace talking to people. How much do you think other people would pay for this?
That's great. It's so much better than asking them what they'd pay, because that hurts, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to have to pay anything.
And they don't want to. And
Right.
they don't want to. Right?
So
So
Dwayne
someone, I'm sorry, Greg, before we started, someone had a question.
yes,
What
yeah,
what was the
Dwayne put a
before we
question up.
started?
Must you explain a reason for a price increase?
Do you have to explain a reason? You don't have to. Here's the way I think about it. When you raise prices, let's talk about subscriptions for a second. If you raise prices on new customers only, they don't even know you raise prices. So no, you don't need to explain it. You don't need a justification for it. Just do it. When you raise prices on your current subscribers, they will hate you, period, right? If you justify it, they hate you a little bit less. So my advice is definitely justify it if you're going to raise prices on your current subscribers. But you know, in the end, you don't have to. I think I use QuickBooks for my business, and Intuit raises my price every year. I don't think they give me a justification. I think they just say, hey, you're paying me more this year. And I hate them every year. It's like, I just can't afford to leave them, but I hate them every year.
Right. So Stephanie asks, can you address the pros, the benefits of timing, if not directly tying, and the introduction of new features or enhanced service to coincide with the price increase? So we raised the price because we increased this feature, benefit, whatever on the product.
Yeah, I think the timing that I would think about with that isn't we're releasing this new feature, therefore we're going to charge you more. Because what you're doing is saying to the customer, you don't have a choice, you have to buy my new feature. What I would do if I wanted to raise prices on everybody is I would release the new feature, and then 3 months, 6 months later, when it's time to raise prices on everybody, I would use the 4-step process. And one of the things I would talk about is the fact that, yeah, we added more value and this was the new feature we put in, but it isn't just that reason, because you don't want to tell people you have to buy this, even if you don't want it. So you want to be really careful about that. On the other hand, what you could do, which makes a ton of sense, is as you start adding new features, new capabilities, start creating good, better, best product offers. Start making it so that people would pay you more for the products with more features. And then the people who are really price sensitive buy the base level product, whatever that happens to be.
So Lauren asks, Lauren, could you take off your mute for just a second? Lauren asks, what if you were doing price rises annually? And I'm assuming that you're tying that into Dwayne's question of must you explain a reason for a price increase? Is that correct?
Actually, I wasn't, but I think you've kind of answered it a little bit anyway. I think I was just it was all about how you can give customers something back, like freezing their price, but that might be difficult if you're kind of doing an incremental price rise every year. But looking at price sensitivity, I think, is actually really helpful, like doing some analysis on like who's going to be most sensitive to that price rise, who's most likely to retain based on previous price rises, probably the way to do it going forwards. Yeah, I was just thinking of ways to soften the blow, like you said, like Netflix did. And it's quite tricky when it's incrementally every year, I suppose.
Okay. Now that Lauren brought that up, first off, I just want to talk for a couple of minutes, if that's okay, Greg.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to share a couple of really key points. But before I do that, I just want to mention to Lauren, if you can train your customers to expect a price increase every year, that's gold, right? I love that. I've always worked a ton in tech spaces where they always expect a price decrease every year. So I'm always jealous of people who can get price increases every year. And so if you could teach them to train them to do that and expect it, that's awesome. Now, we probably should have started the whole talk out with these 2 points, Greg. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
But they're the 2 most important things that you want to think about in pricing. The most important decision any company can make around pricing is to adopt value-based pricing. Now, value-based pricing is really easy to understand. It means charge what your customer is willing to pay. It is impossible to do perfectly. You can't read your customer's mind. You have no idea exactly how much they're willing to pay. Customers are different. It's just impossible. But it is an attitude, it's a goal. And when we start thinking that way, we start to make much smarter, better decisions around our pricing. How do I capture more of what my market is willing to pay? The second most crucial decision that any company can make is to adopt price segmentation. And price segmentation means charge different prices to different customers based on their willingness to pay. A lot of people struggle with this. What if someone learns that I charged a lower price to that person? Is it really fair? Right? I'm not being fair to everybody. Let me assure you that this is the right thing to do in so many different respects. First off, is it fair? What if someone else learns? Do you think the person sitting next to you on the last time you took a flight, assuming that they weren't related to you, paid the same price you did for that airplane ticket? Probably not. It happens all the time. If you don't use coupons and someone else does, they got a better price than you. Do you hate them for that? Probably not. Right? We see this all the time. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because Lauren had such a good point, and that is when we're going to raise prices on our current subscribers, you do not have to raise prices on all of your subscribers. I have a really strong opinion that if you have a way to measure usage, think of usage as a proxy for how much they value your product. So if you have a way to measure usage, the people who use your product a lot, value it a lot, raise their price. They're just going to keep taking it. The people who rarely use your product don't raise their price. Because if you raise their price, they're likely to churn. Here's a hint on what happens with price increases and subscriptions. Most of you probably have Netflix accounts. Pretend for a moment that you do, even if you don't. And probably what happens is you pay it with a credit card and you don't even think about it. It just gets charged to you every single month. A couple months ago, Netflix announced another price increase. When you got the email, I guarantee you this is what you thought. Am I watching Netflix enough? Should I keep paying for this or not? Now, most of you probably said yes. They actually did lose a bunch of subscribers during that time. But the point is, when you raise your subscribers' prices, they will rethink their decision. And so I choose to only raise prices on people who are going to choose, when they rethink the decision, make the decision in my favor. Does that make sense to everybody?
Makes sense to me.
It does. Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Yep.
So Ed, you had a comment about how you guys deal with price increases every year. Was there a question in that or something you wanted to say to Mark?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Greg. Hi, Mark. When I was a B2B publisher, you were talking about sort of automatically raising price points every year. And that's what we used to do. And, you know, typically they were like 5% a year, unless inflation was crazy or some, you know, specific external events could enable us to justify more than 5% kind of range. Now, as a B2C publisher, we tend to pick price points and we stick to those. So, we want prices just below $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever. Once we get to 5,000, we tend to go to even numbers above $5,000, and below that, we tend to do like $497 and that sort of thing. Do you have and we don't change the prices very much, but if we do, we might go from $497. We don't raise it 5%. If we decide $497 is no longer the point, now we'll jump to $797 or even $997. We're thinking in those kinds of terms. I was wondering if you have any comment on those two kinds of approaches, that sort of small increments constantly, or finding sort of price points and keeping just under them.
Yeah. So there's a field called behavioral economics that you may have heard of, may not have. It has to do with how is it that buyers are irrational. And if you ever want to read a good book, Dan Ariely wrote a book called Predictably Irrational. And so we know that buyers are irrational. It turns out that consumers tend to be much more irrational than businesses. So there are some tricks that work well in the B2C space that don't work well in the B2B space. If I messed that up, I'm sorry, but you know what I meant, right? They work well in one side and not the other side. And so things like these magic price points, right? $497, just below 500 is truly a magic price point in a lot of consumers' minds. So for you to go over 500 is tough. And if you're going to go over 500, you might as well go over 500 by a lot in a consumer's mind. When we're selling B2B, they tend to be, those magic price points tend to be less important. In fact, in B2B, they're usually important when you think about individual people's signing authority, right? So some people have the ability to sign up to $1,000. Well, great, I've got a $995 price, right? So you can buy this. Right? And so I think that probably made a lot of sense just from the way you described it for those two decisions.
So I think, Mark, you made a point about the difference between luxury purchases and non-luxury purchases with that question of, the $497 instead of the higher, that there's a place at which it crosses over from using that trick to trying to go to even numbers. Okay.
My doctoral dissertation was on 99 cents. Why do companies use nines or 99 cents? And the reason that it works is because we are lazy subtractors. Typically what happens is we're making a decision between two different products. So we look at which one's more expensive, how much more expensive. So we're subtracting those two prices. And if it's hard to subtract those prices, we make an estimate, a guess. And what really happens is we use the left-hand digits. And as long as the left-hand digits are different, we can ignore the right-hand digits. Well, if my customers are going to ignore the right-hand digits, I'm going to make them all nines because I make more money. That just makes sense. We have seen this so much that buyers have now been trained to think that prices that end in 9 or 97 as well are good deals, are low prices. And there's a price point at which, and I think it was Ed that just said this, there's a price point at which buyers start to look at the price point as higher quality. So you'll see 0 zeros as a higher quality product or higher quality price. That's why all of my prices are round numbers, because I want everybody to know that it's high quality. Right? I mean, they're big numbers, but they're round numbers.
Good.
If you go to a shoe store and walk through a shoe store, here's what you're going to find. All of their inexpensive shoes end in 99, 97, something like that. There's going to be a price point at which they shift to zeros, right? So it could be $200, $225, $250, something like that. And it's pretty fascinating to see this.
Interesting. So Dan asks a follow-up on when you were talking about the comfortable versus struggling concept. Can you apply the comfortable versus struggling concept to a B2B scenario in an inflationary environment?
Absolutely. Instead of comfortable and struggling, call it profitable and unprofitable. Right. So companies who are not profitable, they're just struggling to survive. Right. Where are they going to spend money? What are the necessities? Companies that are profitable, they're going to try to cut back a little bit, but they're still going to do all the things they need to do to keep their business running.
And then Anna asks, should you raise prices if you are not gaining market share as quickly as anticipated?
Let's talk about pricing and market share for a few seconds, because this is a really tricky issue. If you are in a brand new product category and the product category is in the introduction or the growth stage of a product life cycle, then you can use price to gain market share if you want. And the reason I say that is because when a market gets to maturity, it's actually really hard to change market share, right? Whoever's won the market share battle in the growth phase keeps that share in maturity phase. Once a market is in maturity, if you decide that you want to lower your price to gain share, what's going to happen is your competitors are just going to copy you. And all we've done is hurt industry profits, right? We haven't grown the industry any faster. We're just taking everybody's money and giving it back to the consumer. So the answer that I would give to the question is, I don't think of using price to gain share. I think of using price as one of the tools to get share during a growth market and never in a mature market.
Okay, good.
I'd love to hear what she thinks. Was that a good answer, Anna, or not?
It is helpful. I'm not thinking about decreasing the price to gain share. We know that we're not gaining enough share due to some issues with user experience. So we're working on improving that. However, at the same time, in parallel, we're discussing possibility of price increase. And that's my question. If I know my market has a question about product usage, should I increase the price anyway?
So every time we make a pricing decision, every time we think about pricing, what we do is we put ourselves in the shoes of our buyers. Who's making this decision? What's the decision they're about to make? And what you're describing to me is my product has a little bit of a challenge, but our costs are going up. We'd really love to be able to raise prices. Should we raise price? Well, here's how your buyers are thinking right now. They're deciding between your product and a competitor's product. If the competitor just raised their price, that gives you room to be able to raise your price. If your competitor didn't raise their price and you decide to lead the price increase, that feels a little risky if you think the product is bad. However, we sometimes overemphasize our own negatives, and maybe our buyers and customers don't know that. And we could probably still lead the price increase. I would just be careful leading a price increase in that situation.
Perfect, thank you. That was really helpful.
Interesting. Chantel asks, does the good, better, best model work even if you are increasing your baseline good price to higher than the existing price? Or do you offer a lower base price with stripped back features?
Okay, there's a great study. I'm just going to give you the results of the study, but it's fabulous, where they start with two different beers. One's called a bargain beer and one's called a premium beer. And then they add a super premium beer to see what happens, right? A more expensive beer. And what happens is people buy up in the product category. People are using the choice set to make a decision. So if you add a new product to the high end, more people will buy your higher level products. On the other hand, if you add a super bargain beer instead of the super premium beer, the exact opposite thing happens. And that is more people buy down in the product category. And so you've now got people who used to buy your current product are going to shift down to your new low expensive product. And people who used to buy your high-end product are going to shift down to your mid-level product. So I'm usually cautious about saying I want to enter or add a product to the bottom end of my product line. Many companies think they have to do this because they've got competition, there's price competitors out there. And by the way, maybe that's true. If you're losing a bunch of business to a low price competitor, maybe you want to do that. But just know that when you do that, people who are currently buying your current products are going to shift down in product categories. And let me give you an example when I say that. Netflix, I love Netflix as an example for companies. I don't know why, but you may know that Netflix just released their ad-supported model. So instead of, I think we pay $20 a month for Netflix or something like that. I think it's $8 a month if you're willing to watch ads in your shows. Now, in my mind, what that just did was it caused a whole bunch of people who are currently paying them $20 a month to say, oh, I only have to pay them $8. I think I'm going to shift down. And as more people buy into Netflix, they're now looking at those two choices and saying, oh, I'd rather pay $8 than $20. I'm going to buy the $8 product, not the $20 product. So I think they're getting people to shift down in making that decision. Now, just to be fair to Netflix, they claim they're going to make more money on the $8 subscribers than on the $20 subscribers, which may or may not be true. I don't know. But in that case, it's not a stupid decision on their part, but understand that's what's going to happen.
Interesting. So Matt asks, how many publishers are increasing price every year? He wants to do a poll. Unfortunately, I can't edit the poll, but we can hack it if you like. The poll says, how value was this webinar? So here's what I'm going to say. As long as Mark doesn't take offense at this, we're gonna hack this and say, if you're raising prices every year, click very valuable, and if you're not raising prices every year, say not valuable. Everybody got that? If you're raising prices every year, click very valuable. Let's see if this works. All right, you should be getting a poll. If you're raising prices every year, click very valuable. If you're not, click not valuable.
So,
all right.
So Greg, you realize that everybody's going to click not valuable, which makes my webinar look horrible.
That's why I was asking your permission. So Chantel notes, just by the way, that only yesterday Netflix released a new basic package. Is that what you're talking about, the $8 price?
I didn't see the announcement yesterday, but I saw one recently.
Okay.
So it may be the same, it may not be.
Okay. So what are the best ways you've seen to research/uncover value-based pricing? That is the value customers get from your content. How do you find out what value they get from your content?
This is a really, really hard question. You can Google what I'm about to tell you. There's a technique called Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter, which is a series of 4 questions you can ask that are a little bit better than the question I gave you earlier, which is how much do you think other people would pay for this? And that technique does a decent job at capturing a willingness to pay, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't show how you're going to communicate value better to your customers. The third book I just wrote was called Selling Value. And I'm a huge, huge fan of us having conversations with our customers and truly understanding where that value is coming from. Now, this is so much easier to do in a B2B world than it is in a B2C world. In a B2B world, a company is not going to give you money unless they think you're somehow making them money. And our job needs to be to understand how our product makes that company money. You've likely seen, heard of, even have an ROI calculator. Now, I'm not a fan of ROI calculators. I am a fan of ROI calculators if all you can do is talk to people on your webpage and they can go click through the ROI calculator, sure, that's fine. But if you give an ROI if a B2B salesperson gives an ROI calculator to a customer, the customer doesn't believe the results. They think you're cheating somehow. But if the salesperson has the knowledge and ability to help that customer calculate the value of their product, the economic value of their product, then the customer believes it because they came up with the numbers. They did the math. And so in my mind, B2B sales, we should absolutely be focused on how do we improve the profitability of our customers? And that's what truly drives value.
Andy, I know this was a key point for you. Does that answer your question? You're on mute, by the way. Andy, you're on mute.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Tracy asked, do you have any thoughts about when to communicate a price increase for customers on continuous payments? Obviously, there are rules from banks, but would you communicate with the customers all at one time or tell them before their payment is due? Do you have any experience of what works better in terms of cancellation, in terms of limiting cancellations, I assume? So this is a situation where maybe they get their credit card dinged once a year. Continuous payments is common in the magazine industry, and you're going to raise price. When do you communicate?
I'm thinking.
Okay. While you're thinking, I'll just give the results of the poll. So out of 24 responses, 13 said that they do raise their prices every year. 10 said that they don't, and 1 said in the middle. I guess that means every other year or something.
So let me give you the best answer I can imagine to when to raise your price. Assuming it's an annual billing, what I would probably do is I would raise my price 6 months after somebody subscribed. And the reason I say that is by the time the next 6 months are up, they'll have forgotten that we raised their price.
Interesting. So what about a situation where your pricing is public on your website and your system is not built so that you can easily show different prices for different audiences? Do promo codes work as an alternative so you can offer better pricing to different audiences?
Yeah, so you could think of a promo code as a coupon, essentially, that says, I'm going to give this type of people a different price. The reason that a lot of companies use promo codes is affiliate programs, where I can get someone else who's finding my customers for me to give a promo code, they get a discount, and then I give a kickback or referral fee to whoever it is that got me the client, whoever it is that got me the customer. So that's why promo codes are often used. Is this I'm going to guess this is a B2C situation. So everybody's on the same web page. Everybody's looking at my prices on the same web page.
Tama, do you want to unmute and answer that?
No, it's B2B. It's B2B, and we're like a database, and people access the database on the website.
And do you have a direct sales force too?
Yes, it's small, but yes.
Okay. The nice thing is when you do when you put your pricing on your web page, you always put on your highest prices, right? Because you don't want someone else to feel cheated or hosed or something. And then you can offer discounts to anybody you want for whatever reason you want. And so if you've got a direct sales force, if they have the ability to negotiate or they have the ability to reach out to people, they can offer specific prices to specific market segments or customers, whatever it is that we feel is appropriate in that respect. And nobody else actually knows that it happened. So there's nothing at all wrong with that.
Mhm.
And in B2B world, I don't see promo codes very often.
Mhm. Okay.
Can I give you, since this one came up, I want to give you another really cool trick. If you're in a B2C world, I have one of my clients is a school. They do an online school, and they offer a scholarship to some students, which if you want to apply for financial aid, you click a button, you fill out a form, and everybody who fills out the form gets a $50 discount. It's just like a hurdle that says, prove to me you're price sensitive, right? They called it a scholarship or financial aid, but most people aren't going to fill it out, especially if you don't think you're going to earn financial aid. It's just a really cool trick.
Interesting. Do you recommend advanced renewal programs that allow a customer to avoid a coming price increase?
Sure. I love cash flow. So if someone wants to give me more money up front, absolutely give me more money up front. So I would absolutely do that.
Okay. And how practical is it to charge different amounts based on usage when dealing with a large number of accounts?
There are payment systems that make this very, very possible. I'm laughing because Greg and I were talking about the fact that the Subscription Insider Show is mostly a payments processing show at this point in time. But there are so many companies that do this for you almost automatically. You just have to be able to set up what it is. Usage. Let me talk a little bit about usage. It seems to be this hot button in subscriptions right now. Pricing for usage is essentially the same. The decision we're trying to make is, what's the pricing metric that we're going to use? What are we going to charge for? And magazines are really easy because we send you a magazine once a month or once a week or however often it is, and you pay us, this fee a month or this fee a year, and that's it, right? It's done. So we're essentially selling it by the time. On the other hand, you could be selling by the click or by the download or by the article read or by the amount of storage you use or by the number of users. I mean, there's a million things you could charge for. And oftentimes we think of some of those things we could charge for are usage, right? How much are you using my product? Usage tends to make a lot of sense to charge for, because what happens is, as people use more of our product, they're getting more value from our product. And the more value they get, the more they're paying us. And that just makes sense. That's what we should be thinking. On the other hand, when we charge for usage, we also disincentivize usage, right? So if I'm going to charge you every time you click, you're going to think, do I really need to click right now? Maybe I'll not click today. And so the way I tend to think about usage is, if I am an expense to somebody, I try to put usage into tiers and say, you've got up to 1,000 clicks. I'm just going to say the word clicks, right? You've got up to 1,000 clicks at this price and 10,000 clicks at this price. And on the other hand, if I'm directly in the revenue path, so every time you use me, it's because you're making money, then I have no qualms about charging about usage. Because now they're thinking, well, the more I use you, the more money I make. That's exactly what I want them to be thinking. Totally okay. So think about PayPal. PayPal's charging a percent of a deal, or credit cards are charging a percent of a deal. They're essentially just making money when you're making money. And that's a great way to do usage.
Great. And just by the way, Dan, that's a use case for a customer data platform, is figuring out usage with a lot of different accounts. Another question, if you have an annual price, does it make sense to show your subscribers a per month price, even if they have to pay up front for 12 months? This is a B2B scenario.
A lot of companies do that because it looks less expensive. If your competitors are doing it, then you probably want to do it because they're going to compare you to your competition and you want it to look similar. They're comparing apples and apples. Let me give you a different answer though. Unless you have a really high implementation fee, then, or implementation cost, then I would absolutely offer a month-to-month price, right? I think everybody should offer a month-to-month price and then also offer an annual price. And here's why I believe that. One of the huge advantages to subscriptions is I can go try your product without having to commit to a big number. And so if you give me the ability to subscribe for a month, I can go test it and see, does it really do what I think it's supposed to do? And that says to me, oh, you trust your product, right? You believe in your product. And then to offer an annual price that's, 10 to 20% off the monthly price times 12, then that's just helping our cash flow and it gets our customers more committed to us. So I'm totally okay with that. But I think unless you've got a large implementation cost, offering month to month, or unless your product is horrible and you have to trick people into buying for a year, which I hope that's not the case, then I love month-to-month pricing.
So I'm going to put Stephanie on the spot. Stephanie, if you're still here, Stephanie says that she was looking at Van Westendorp, whatever that thing is, and added some additional questions to it to find out what constitutes value for your customers. So what were those additional questions?
This is Suzanne, and I've actually, I have Stephanie's identity. I've stolen it here, evidently, on this presentation. But what we did is included those questions with a slider scale in a survey during a beta launch. So trying to come up with pricing, fair pricing, something that would be picked up by a market that was new to us, a market segment. So we really just combined that with other questions related, more to what brought value through the eyes of the customer. So let's say those were 3 questions out of probably 10. We did the survey. We did a before, or it was a 3-month pilot, sorry. And we did a baseline survey in the first month, and then we did one in the 3rd month. And we looked at the difference in those scales and the answer to those questions over that time frame. We did change some of the questions in the month 3 survey because they had more knowledge of the product. But it was more related to the typical kinds of features, departments, benefits, and getting people to rate how important to them those particular features, benefits. It could have been anything in our world. It was things like risk management pitfalls versus clinical pathways versus other types of features in the content that we would offer.
Thanks for that explanation, Suzanne. I have to cut you off in the interest of time. Any comment on that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the nice things about Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter is you don't need a ton of data. And if you ask some other questions, you can think of it as demographic or market segmentation type data. What you'll end up finding is that the people, you'll start to recognize this type of person, or the people who think this way tend to have the highest willingness to pay. And we can start thinking, who is it that we want to target when we're focusing our new product launch, and especially as we're setting our prices. So yeah, I think that's a great idea to add questions to the price sensitivity meter.
All right, so one last question here. What is your take on discount schedules based on the number of users within an account? That is, more users equals deeper discounts. And if a discount schedule is implemented, how do we know we are optimizing the discount tiers?
Okay, let me first talk about volume-based discounts. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's by user or by anything, it's volume-based discounts. And most of the time, people believe we're doing volume-based discounts because of economies of scale. And that is not a true statement, right? Economies of scale imply that we're doing cost plus pricing. And you've never heard me mention cost plus pricing the entire time we've been talking, right? It's always about what's my customer willing to pay. The real reason we do volume-based discounting is twofold. One is maybe our competitors are doing that, in which case we have to look competitive at the different volume points. The second reason is we incentivize additional purchases when we make additional purchases less expensive. You may recall, if you're old like me, going to a record store and they have the price, the thing that says buy one, get one half off. So why did they do that? Because when you walked in, you were probably buying one anyway, but you probably weren't buying two. And that get one half off just sold a second record. They made a little margin on it. Life was good. And so maybe we do the same thing there.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's put this in terms of users. Users are the pricing metric. It's what we charge for. And so you could think of this as records, right? This is in the way the question was asked, we're charging based on users or the pricing metric. What I would be asking is, how much value do our users get? Are we extending? Are the next users that come on less valuable to the customer than the previous users that were on? Do I want to try to incentivize more and more people to come on? So that's how I would be thinking about the question. There's nothing wrong with it. It isn't a default that we should say, yes, let's do it.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
So Mark, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I have a whole other page of questions I could ask you, but we're out of time today. How should people, if people have additional questions, how should they ask it on LinkedIn? What would be best?
Yeah. So if you feel like it, just send me a LinkedIn connection. I usually accept most of them. As long as you don't try to sell me something right after I accept it, then I'm totally okay with that.
That's right.
And then send me questions and I'm happy to see if I can address them for you.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation and really appreciate your advice on all these pricing questions. And thanks to all of the attendees for attending today's webinar. I put a couple links in the chat about, if you're not already a member, how you can join Renewed. And if you haven't already joined Guild, which is our community discussion area, you can find the link there. And that's it. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good day.